I never thought my life would take the turn that it did. Looking back, maybe I was naive, or maybe I just wanted to believe in the version of my life that felt safe. My name is Daniel Carter, and until recently, I was a man with a steady job, a loving wife, and what I thought was an unshakable marriage. Emily and I had been married for 12 years. We met in college, one of those whirlwind romances that just made sense at the time. She was everything I wanted in a partner: smart, beautiful, kind. She had this laugh that could fill a whole room, and when she looked at me, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We built a life together. Bought a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where neighbors wave and the biggest scandal is a misplaced trash bin. I worked in IT for a small firm, and she was a marketing executive at a growing company. She loved her job. It was demanding, sure, but she thrived in it. Late meetings, business trips, networking events, none of it ever worried me. I trusted her. But looking back, maybe I should have been paying more attention. Lately, something felt off. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just little things that didn't add up. Emily had always been affectionate, the type to leave me cute notes or send me texts in the middle of the day just to say she missed me. But over the last few months, that started to fade. At first, I brushed it off. She was busy, stressed. We all go through phases. But then there were other things. She started dressing up more for work. That wasn't completely unusual, but it was different. More effort, more perfume, more time getting ready. She was glued to her phone in a way she never used to be. And then, there was the first real red flag. It was a Saturday morning. I had just come back from the gym, and Emily was in the shower. Her phone was on the nightstand, buzzing with a notification. I glanced at it, reflex more than anything. A message preview popped up. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. My stomach twisted. I wasn't the jealous type. I never had a reason to be. But this? This was different. My mind raced. Could it be a misunderstanding? A joke? A spam message? When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, hair damp, I forced myself to act normal. I couldn't ask, not yet. I needed to be sure. Over the next few days, I watched her more closely. The way she guarded her phone, how she'd smile at a message and then quickly lock the screen. I noticed how she'd stay up later than usual, scrolling, texting. Then came the night she told me she had to work late. She'd worked late plenty of times before, but something about this time felt different. I checked her location on our shared phone app. She was nowhere near her office. That was the moment I knew. I didn't have all the details, but I didn't need them. My wife was cheating on me. And I had no idea what to do next. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The green dot on my phone screen mocked me, sitting miles away from where Emily claimed she would be. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. My wife was lying to me. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears, my stomach twisting into knots so tight I thought I might be sick. This couldn't be happening. Not to us. Not to me. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. I had to be sure. Jumping to conclusions wouldn't do me any good. Maybe there was an explanation, maybe her work meeting had been moved to a different location. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I opened the messaging app and stared at our last conversation. Me, what time do you think you'll be home? Emily, late. It's a mess at the office. Don't wait up. She sent that message 40 minutes ago. And yet, the location tracker showed she was sitting at a place on the other side of town. A residential address. A house. I could barely process it. What do I do? I should have waited. I should have thought things through. But logic wasn't in control anymore, rage was. Without even realizing it, I had shifted the car into drive, heading toward the address on the screen. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. My hands were sweaty, my body tense. I imagined every worst-case scenario. Emily sitting across from some man, drinking wine, laughing. Emily in his arms. Emily in his bed. The thoughts made my chest tighten, my vision blur with anger. 15 minutes later, I pulled up to the house. It was a nice neighborhood, quiet, with well-maintained lawns and expensive cars parked in driveways. The kind of place where people walked their dogs at dusk and waved to their neighbors. I turned off my engine and sat there, staring. Emily's car was parked in the driveway. That was it. That was all the confirmation I needed. I felt like the world was caving in on me. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone out, hovering over her contact. I could call her. I could demand to know why she was here. But I didn't. Instead, I got out of the car, my footsteps eerily calm as I walked toward the house. The front door was closed, but the lights inside were on. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a second, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if this wasn't what it looked like? But then, through the partially drawn blinds, I saw movement. A shadow. 2 shadows. One was Emily's. The other was a man's. My mouth went dry. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself forward. I knocked. No response. I knocked again, harder this time. Then, I heard it rustling inside, hurried footsteps. A few seconds later, the door cracked open, and there she was. Emily. Her hair was slightly messy, her shirt rumpled. Her face went pale when she saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, both of us frozen in place. Daniel, she whispered, as if she had seen a ghost. I pushed the door open wider before she could stop me. And then I saw him. A man. Maybe mid-40s, slightly older than me. Tall, fit, wearing nothing but a pair of jeans, his shirt nowhere in sight. His expression was a mix of shock and guilt. Everything inside me shattered. Emily took a step back, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, some excuse, some lie. But what could she say? I turned to the man, my fists clenching. Who the hell are you? He hesitated, glancing at Emily as if waiting for permission to speak. I didn't wait. I lunged. Emily screamed, stepping between us, but I wasn't going to hit him. No violence wouldn't give me the answers I needed. Say something, I demanded, my voice shaking. Emily swallowed hard. Daniel. I can explain. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Explain? Are you serious? I gestured toward the half-naked man behind her. What could you possibly say to explain this? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She didn't get to cry. The man finally spoke. I think you should leave. I turned to him, my hands balling into fists again. You don't get to tell me what to do in my own damn marriage. Emily grabbed my arm. Daniel, please, let's talk about this somewhere else. Somewhere else? Like what? After she got dressed and pretended this was nothing. Who is he? I asked again. She hesitated. I had my answer. I took a step back, the reality sinking in. I didn't want to be in that house anymore. Didn't want to breathe the same air as them. I turned and walked away, ignoring Emily's calls behind me. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, my whole body shaking. I had always wondered how I would react if this ever happened to me. Would I cry? Would I scream? I did neither. I just sat there, feeling everything and nothing all at once. Then, I started the car and drove away. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I don't remember driving home that night. I must have stopped at a red light or two, obeyed traffic laws, but everything was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. My brain felt like it was on fire, running through every possible scenario, every question I never thought I'd have to ask. How long? Why him? Why me? The house was empty when I got back. Of course, it was. Emily was still with him. I walked into our bedroom and just stood there. It didn't feel like my room anymore. The bed where we had slept together, laughed together, where I once believed we shared everything, it was all tainted now. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I started opening drawers. Not in a rage, not breaking things. Just looking. I found receipts, dinners I hadn't been invited to, hotels I never knew she stayed at. I found perfume I had never smelled on her, lingerie I had never seen her wear. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. My stomach twisted into knots, and I had to sit down. The realization hit me like a freight train. I had been living in a lie for months, maybe longer. And she had let me. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall. Maybe an hour. Maybe 5 minutes. But at some point, my phone buzzed. Emily. I let it ring. She called again. And again. Then came the texts. Emily, Daniel, please, let's talk. Emily, I'm coming home now. Please don't do anything rash. Emily, can we just talk before you make any decisions? I laughed bitterly. Before I make any decisions? Like I was the problem. I didn't reply. Instead, I made a decision right then and there. I wasn't going to be the pathetic husband who begged to understand, who let his cheating wife cry and make excuses. I needed to confront her. I needed to hear her admit it to my face. The confrontation. She walked in the door about 30 minutes later. I was waiting in the living room, sitting in the dark. She jumped when she saw me. Jesus, Daniel, she breathed, clutching her chest. You scared me. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. She hesitated before stepping closer. Can we please talk? I folded my arms. Talk? Like how you talk to him. She winced. It's not what you think. I scoffed. Oh, please. Don't insult me, Emily. I saw you. I know. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. She didn't get to cry. Not tonight. How long? I asked. She hesitated. How long? She looked away. 6 months. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. 6 months. Half a year of lying. Half a year of coming home to me, kissing me, pretending. I nodded, rubbing a hand over my face. Unbelievable. Daniel, I never meant to hurt you. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Never meant to hurt me? Are you actually serious right now? What the hell did you think was going to happen? She bit her lip, shaking her head. I don't know. I didn't. I just. Why him? I cut in. Who the hell is he? She swallowed hard. His name is Mark, she finally admitted. We met at a networking event last year. It started as just casual conversation. Then it turned into lunch meetings. Then. She stopped. I clenched my jaw. Then what? She exhaled. Then it turned into something more. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You mean sex, Emily? Just say it. You had sex with him. She nodded, wiping at her tears. Yes. A part of me had still been holding on to some last shred of hope, some desperate, stupid part of my brain trying to convince me that maybe I had it wrong. But now it was real. Now, it was fact. I stood up so fast that she took a step back. I wasn't going to hit her, I would never do that, but I needed space. I couldn't stand to be near her. Daniel, please, she whispered. Can we just? Why? I asked. She blinked. What? Why, Emily? What was missing? What was so bad about our life that you had to sneak around behind my back for 6 months? She swallowed, glancing down. I don't know. Bullshit, I spat. You do know. She took a shaky breath. I felt lost. I felt like we had become distant, like we were just roommates going through the motions. And then Mark made me feel seen. I laughed coldly. Seen? Are you joking? I have spent the last 12 years loving you, supporting you, making sacrifices for us. And you think I didn't see you? She looked away. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice low. I never even thought about cheating on you. Not once. Even when I felt distant, even when things got hard. Because I respected us too damn much. Silence. Do you love him? I asked finally. She looked up at me, eyes wide. What? I stepped closer, my voice steady. Do you love him? Her lower lip trembled. That hesitation was all I needed. I nodded slowly, stepping back. Wow. You don't even know, do you? Tears streamed down her face. Daniel, I love you. You don't get to say that, I snapped. She flinched. I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair. This is over, I said, my voice quieter now. Her breath hitched. What? You heard me. Daniel, please. I'm filing for divorce. She shook her head wildly. No, we can fix this. Please, let's go to therapy, let's. I scoffed. Therapy? Are you kidding? You didn't want therapy when you were screwing him. You only want it now because you got caught. She sobbed, dropping onto the couch. I don't want to lose you. You already lost me. Her shoulders shook. I turned, walking toward the bedroom. Where are you going? She choked out. To pack. I paused at the doorway, glancing back at her. I'm done, Emily. Then I walked away. The suitcase sat open on the bed, half filled with clothes I barely remembered packing. My hands moved on their own, shoving shirts, jeans, socks into the empty space like I was on autopilot. My mind was stuck on repeat, replaying every word of that conversation, every flicker of emotion on Emily's face. I had expected anger from her. Maybe denial. Maybe even some kind of twisted attempt at making me feel responsible. But no, she cried. She begged. She pleaded. Like I was the one walking away for no reason. Like she wasn't the one who had been sneaking around for 6 months, crawling into another man's bed while I sat at home believing we were just in a rough patch. She cheated. She broke us. She killed this marriage. And now, here I was, the one packing my bags. It was pathetic. Daniel, please. Her voice came from the doorway. I didn't look up. I couldn't. Just stop for a second. Please, let's talk. I zipped the suitcase closed. We did talk, Emily. Not like this. Her voice cracked. I heard her step forward, closer. I don't want you to leave. I let out a bitter laugh, finally turning to face her. Of course you don't. You don't want to lose the husband who pays half the mortgage, who listens to your work drama, who does your grocery shopping while you're off networking with Mark. She flinched at his name, tears spilling over. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, I snapped. Tell me how sneaking around with some guy from a work event was different from every other affair in the world. She wiped at her face, swallowing hard. I made a mistake. I scoffed. A mistake is leaving the oven on overnight. A mistake is backing into a parking pole. You don't accidentally cheat on your husband for 6 months. She stepped forward again, hesitating like she wanted to touch me, but I moved back. You've always been so good to me, she whispered, voice trembling. I know that. I never stopped loving you, Daniel, I swear. I don't even know why I did it. I clenched my jaw. You don't even know? She shook her head quickly, like she was desperate to make me believe her. I wasn't looking for anything. It just happened. We started talking, and then we got close, and then. She trailed off, biting her lip. I could feel the anger creeping back up my throat like bile. You let it happen, Emily. That's the difference. She sobbed, covering her face. I know. I know I did. For a moment, I just watched her cry. I wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted to feel some sense of justice that she was hurting now. But all I felt was exhaustion. I picked up my suitcase and started toward the door. Wait. She grabbed my arm. Where are you even going? I pulled free from her grasp. I don't know. A hotel. Somewhere that isn't here. Her eyes were red, frantic. This is your home too. Not anymore. Her face crumpled, and I felt a flicker of guilt. But then I remembered her choices, her betrayals, and the guilt disappeared. I'll come back for the rest of my things later, I muttered. She shook her head wildly. No, don't do this. Don't just leave like this. I exhaled, gripping the suitcase handle tighter. How else should I leave, Emily? She had no answer. So I walked past her, out the door, and into the night. The next step. The first night away was hell. I checked into a cheap hotel a few miles away, threw my suitcase onto the floor, and collapsed onto the bed. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, the carpet had seen better days, and the air conditioning rattled every few minutes. But I didn't care. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. I had left my house, our house. I had walked away from a woman I had spent over a decade building a life with. And now, I had nothing but a half-packed suitcase and a brain full of questions I didn't want the answers to. Sleep never came. By morning, I had 2 unread messages from Emily. Emily, I just want to know if you're okay. Emily, please, can we just talk one more time? I deleted them without responding. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and did what I should have done the moment I caught her. I searched for a divorce lawyer. The preparation. By the next afternoon, I was sitting across from a man named Richard Hayes, one of the best divorce attorneys in town. His office was sleek, modern, filled with expensive-looking furniture and framed law degrees. He sat back in his chair, watching me carefully as I finished explaining everything. So, your wife had an affair, he said plainly, tapping his fingers on his desk. And you're ready to proceed with a divorce? I nodded. Yes. Any kids? No. Any shared business or significant joint assets? I shook my head. Just the house. He nodded, jotting down notes. Good. That simplifies things. I exhaled, rubbing my face. I don't want this to get messy. I don't want months of back and forth, fighting over furniture or whatever. I just want out. Richard leaned forward. Then let me give you some advice. I looked up. Your wife may be crying now, begging you not to leave. But the second she realizes this is real, when she sees the divorce papers, her attitude will change. She might get defensive, she might try to manipulate you, or she might even start fighting for things she doesn't actually care about just to hurt you. That's what cheaters do when they realize they don't have control anymore. I clenched my jaw. So what do I do? You stay smart, he said simply. You keep your emotions out of it. You don't let her drag you into pointless arguments or guilt trips. And above all else, you don't let her dictate how this goes. You control the narrative now. I sat back, thinking. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt something close to clarity. This wasn't just about leaving Emily. This was about making sure she didn't get to decide how this ended. The calm before the storm. 3 days passed before I reached out to Emily again. 3 days of silence. I knew it was driving her insane. Finally, I sent a single text. We need to talk. She responded instantly. Emily, yes. Please. When? I gave her a time. A place. Neutral ground, a cafe in town. No home court advantage for either of us. And when I showed up that afternoon, I wasn't the same man who had begged for answers in our living room. I wasn't there to listen to her excuses. I was there to end this on my terms. The cafe was quiet. A handful of customers sat scattered around the room, sipping lattes, scrolling through their phones, lost in their own worlds. I chose a table in the corner, my back to the wall, where I could see everything. It was a habit now, always watching, always analyzing. Emily walked in 5 minutes later. She spotted me immediately, hesitated for a brief second, then made her way over. She looked different. Tired. Her eyes were swollen, makeup barely covering the dark circles underneath. Her usually perfect hair was tied back messily, and I noticed her nails, normally manicured and painted, were chipped. Good. She sat down across from me, folding her hands on the table. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. I said nothing, just stared at her. She exhaled and looked down at the table. I know I messed up, Daniel. And I know I hurt you in ways I can't even imagine. But I need to understand. Is this really it? Are you really done? I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. Yes. She flinched like I had struck her. Daniel, please. Her voice cracked. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But she broke off, shaking her head. I still love you. I stared at her for a long moment before laughing under my breath. You love me? I repeated. That's interesting. Did you love me when you were sleeping with Mark? She flinched again. Or when you lied to my face for 6 months? I continued. Or when you came home and kissed me with his mouth still on you? Her breath hitched, tears pooling in her eyes. Daniel, No, I snapped, cutting her off. You don't get to cry, Emily. You don't get to sit there and act like you're the victim in this. She wiped at her tears, shaking her head. I'm not, I know I'm not. I don't want to lose you. You already did. Silence stretched between us. The sounds of clinking cups and quiet conversation filled the air, but at this table, it was suffocating. She swallowed hard. Is there really nothing I can do to fix this? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Emily. I don't want to fix this. I don't want to be with someone who betrayed me. I don't even know who you are anymore. Her lip trembled. I'm still me, Daniel. I shook my head. No. The Emily I married wouldn't have done this. She opened her mouth, then closed it, looking away. I exhaled. I spoke to a lawyer. Her head snapped back to me. What? I'm filing for divorce. Her face crumpled. No. She reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled back before she could touch me. Daniel, please don't do this. We can go to therapy. We can. No, Emily, I said firmly. We can't. You don't come back from something like this. You made your choice. Now you live with it. She let out a sob, covering her face with her hands. I waited. I let her cry. But I felt nothing. Maybe I should have. Maybe a better man would have. But I had nothing left to give her. When she finally looked up, her face was blotchy, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. What do you want from me? I pulled a folder out of my bag and slid it across the table. These are the divorce papers. Read them over. My lawyer will be in touch. Her hands shook as she picked up the folder. She swallowed hard, flipping it open. Her eyes scanned the document, whitening slightly. You're giving me the house, she whispered. I nodded. I don't want it. She looked up at me, disbelief written all over her face. Why? Because I don't need a constant reminder of what you did, I said simply. Her throat bobbed. And, what about us? There is no us, Emily. Tears spilled over again. She reached for me one more time, desperate, but I pulled back. This is goodbye, I said, standing. I'll have the rest of my things sent over. Don't contact me again unless it's about the divorce. She stared up at me, completely broken. But I didn't feel bad. I felt free. And for the first time in months, I walked away without looking back. One last loose end. I didn't go back to the hotel. Instead, I drove. I didn't even realize where I was going at first, but when I pulled up outside the sleek apartment complex, it hit me. Mark. I clenched the steering wheel, my pulse pounding in my ears. He lived here. This was where Emily had been sneaking off to. This was where my marriage had died. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I had to see him. I got out of the car, walked up to the building, and buzzed the intercom. A few seconds later, his voice crackled through the speaker. Hello? I didn't hesitate. It's Daniel. Silence. Then, shit. I smiled grimly. Yeah. Shit. A few seconds passed, then the door unlocked. I stepped inside. The confrontation. Mark opened his apartment door cautiously, peering out like he expected me to throw a punch the second I saw him. And honestly? The thought had crossed my mind. He was taller than me. Fitter. He had that effortless, cocky look of a man who had never really faced consequences. Until now. Daniel, listen, he started, holding up his hands. I know you're pissed. I shoved past him into the apartment. Oh, you think? He sighed, rubbing his face. Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. Don't. My voice was ice. Don't feed me that bullshit. He sighed. Emily was unhappy. I lunged. Not to hit him. Just to scare him. And it worked. He stumbled back, hands up defensively. You don't get to talk about her like that, I said, my voice low. You don't get to pretend you know anything about our marriage. He swallowed hard. I didn't. Shut the hell up, Mark. He shut up. I took a slow step forward. I just want one thing from you. He nodded quickly. Yeah, anything, man. I leaned in. Stay the hell away from me. From my life. From Emily. From everything connected to me. Because if I ever see you again, if I so much as hear your name, you'll wish I only showed up at your door once. He paled. Okay. Yeah. Understood. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then I turned and walked out. I never saw Mark again. And I never spoke to Emily again either. Because as far as I was concerned, they were already dead to me. I didn't go back to the hotel after confronting Mark. Instead, I drove. No destination, no plan, just miles of road stretching out ahead of me, disappearing into the night. The city lights faded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the empty, open highway. I rolled down the windows, letting the cool air rush in. My hands still trembled on the wheel, adrenaline from my encounter with Mark refusing to fade. I had expected some sense of closure after telling him off, after seeing the fear in his eyes. But all I felt was exhaustion. I was free now. The marriage was over. The betrayal was out in the open. The divorce papers were sitting in Emily's hands, waiting for her signature. So why did I still feel like there was a weight on my chest? Maybe because I wasn't just mourning my marriage, I was mourning the version of myself that had believed in it. I had spent over a decade thinking I had a solid life, a steady foundation. But the truth was, it had been crumbling for months, maybe even years, and I had been too blind to see it. Emily wasn't who I thought she was. And maybe I wasn't either. Cutting ties. By the time I pulled into a roadside diner, it was close to midnight. A handful of trucks were parked outside, their drivers inside grabbing late-night coffee and greasy burgers. I wasn't hungry, but I needed a moment to think. I sat in a booth in the corner, staring down at my phone. Emily hadn't texted again. Good. Instead, I opened up my contact list and started deleting. Emily gone. Mark gone. Mutual friends gone. I wasn't interested in keeping any connections to my old life. If they knew about the affair and said nothing, I didn't need them. If they didn't know but still took her side, they could go to hell too. One by one, I erased them. Then, I went to social media. I didn't make some dramatic post about betrayal or heartbreak. I didn't air my dirty laundry for sympathy points. I just deactivated everything. No more pictures of our vacations. No more anniversary posts. No more digital history of a marriage that had meant nothing in the end. By the time I was done, it felt like wiping away a part of my past. And for the first time that night, I exhaled. The divorce papers. 3 days passed before Emily called me again. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. Emily, I signed them. That was it. No pleading, no bargaining, no final attempt at convincing me to stay. Just confirmation. I stared at the message for a long moment before finally responding. Me, good. I didn't ask if she was okay. I didn't tell her I hoped she found happiness. I owed her nothing. The aftermath. The next few weeks were strange. The house felt too quiet without me in it, and I still had nights where I reached for my phone, ready to text Emily about something stupid before remembering she wasn't mine to talk to anymore. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town, nothing fancy. Just a fresh start. At first, I thought I would hate being alone. But as the days passed, I realized something: I liked it. No more checking my phone to see if Emily had texted. No more forcing conversations over dinner when she was clearly distracted. No more pretending everything was fine. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. And it felt damn good. Running into Emily. It happened 2 months later. I was at a grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, trying to remember if I actually needed oranges or if I had just seen them in an ad. Then I heard her voice. Daniel? I turned. There she was. Emily. She looked different. Not bad, not broken. Just different. She had cut her hair. She was wearing a sweater I didn't recognize. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't know her anymore. And that was okay. Hey, I said, nodding. She hesitated, shifting awkwardly. How have you been? Good, I said simply. Because it was the truth. She smiled faintly. That's good. An awkward silence stretched between us. I could have asked her how she was doing. I could have asked if she regretted it, if she missed me. But I didn't. Because none of that mattered anymore. Take care, Emily, I said, grabbing my oranges and walking away. I didn't look back. A fresh start. A year passed before I realized I had truly moved on. I didn't think about Emily every day. I didn't wonder if she was happy. I didn't care what she was doing. Because I was living. I had started traveling more, picking up new hobbies, meeting new people. I had built a life that had nothing to do with her. One night, I was out with friends when a woman approached me at the bar. She was confident, beautiful, smiling at me like I was the most interesting person in the room. Hi, she said, tilting her head. You look like you have a story to tell. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, you have no idea. She grinned. Well, then, how about a drink? And just like that, the past felt like it had finally been buried. Because I wasn't Daniel, the betrayed husband, anymore. I was just Daniel. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be.